Hi, I'm Jack Davis, and welcome to another episode of The Zone. Joining me this week, just Kee Seymore. We wanted just some one-on-one time.
Hey, I'm all about
Instead
it.
of Key and Peele, Key and Jack.
Done. Let's do this.
It's going to be the new craze.
I like it.
So we're going to start this week talking about an old NFL scandal brought back to public attention, which is before there was the Adrian Peterson scandal, before there was the Ray Rice scandal, last year, former Miami Dolphins guard Richie Incognito was caught in a bullying scandal for bullying teammate Jonathan Martin. He was suspended from the Dolphins indefinitely before eventually being released. This week, he worked out with my Denver Broncos, who are considering signing Incognito to boost their run game, which ranks 26th in the NFL. Key, we've seen a lot of NFL scandals this year. Again, Richie's kind of got lost in the shuffle. Do you think Incognito deserves a second chance?
I do. I think that, I think America is the land of second chances. And Incognito is a good player. I think they had him ranked 12th or 13th at his position. And as you know, Denver could use the protection, especially heading into the latter part of the season. It did two things. It shined light on the bullying issue as a whole, which was great. And I think he's learned his lesson. It's now been a full year almost where he's been out of a job. And I think that given a second opportunity, just like everyone else gets a second opportunity in the NFL, who have definitely gone and done more, let's say, heinous things. I think it's time for us to forgive, move on, and see if he can bounce back from this.
So, first off, you've played in professional locker rooms. You played college basketball. Do you think that type of dialogue that Incognito used? Now, yes, he used racial epithets and homosexual slurs that are not acceptable ever. But at the same time, do you think that type of kind of locker room bullying and banter is okay, or is it a real issue that he has to change his behavior considerably?
I don't want to ever say that bullying or that type of banter is okay. I think that sets a wrong precedent. But what I will say is it happens. And I think that when you have a collected group of guys that are tolerant of those things, it kind of gets swept under the rug. And I think that, it just so happened that Jonathan Martin was severely affected by it.
Because most of Incognito's teammates actually backed him publicly as this was all happening.
Yeah, including Tannehill.
Including the quarterback. And again, even though he was on record as saying, extremely racist statements and words, his teammates of, all races supported him.
They did. And like I said, it's, when you have I don't want to say the locker room was divided because I don't think it was that extreme, but when you have that going on, someone needs to step up in that locker room from the player standpoint. I don't think it needs to trickle down to the coaches because I think the coaches have enough to worry about. Someone from the player standpoint really needs to step in and say, okay, enough is enough, and let's move on. I think that this whole ordeal got to be so out of hand, and it put it on a national stage. And bullying is a prominent, it was made aware more so in this case than anything else.
Yeah.
So it did shed light on a subject where people, like I said, were sweeping it under the rug.
Well, for me, I'm a Broncos fan, as you know, and I want us to sign Incognito because A, our run defense, our run blocking does need improvement.
Yeah.
We could use depth along the line. We're going to get him at a good price. And B, as much as I think there are some issues in what he didn't commit a crime. And I'm sure Richie Incognito wants to thank Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson because they make him look a lot better in comparison. This is not a crime he committed. It's sort of an internal NFL team issue, not even a league issue. And I'm pretty sure players are welcome back with open arms. You're not going to sign him for more than 1 year, so I think practically it makes sense. And I do agree he should be given a second chance. But we'll see where that goes. As of this time, the Broncos have not signed him. Usually if you're going to sign a player after workout, you do within the first 24 to 48 hours.
Right. No
signing yet. Talk about another academic issue, or another football issue, this one relating to academics, which I'm sure Key's going to have some great thoughts on, is the University of North Carolina academic scandal. As it's been reported over the last few months, UNC football and basketball players were allowed to take joke classes, paper classes they called, where you pretty much got an A for showing up. These were especially heavy in the African American Studies department, where most players were funneled. And this week, a former player came out and said that Butch Davis, UNC's former football coach, specifically said, if you wanted an education, you should have gone to Harvard. Now, also this week, UNC basketball coach Roy Williams has strictly denied any knowledge that this was happening, even though former UNC basketball player Rashad McCants is sort of the one leading these charges. So, Kee, what do you make of everything that's happening in Chapel Hill?
You know, I think that this is no surprise to anyone. This isn't a shock to the system, so to speak. The NCAA is an institution. When you have these top-rated programs, the UNCs of the world, the Dukes of the world, the Oklahomas of the world, in order to keep these kids eligible, you'll do what you need to do. Now, that's not to say that all of these institutions are pushing these classes on these young kids, but that is to say that we need these young kids to continue making money for our program, putting us in the national spotlight, and continually staying in that top 10 arena. You know, this can be traced back to 2009, 2008 when FSU had that huge academic scandal when 61 players were involved in the whole cheating scandal. It's not news. It's just now it's coming out more and more. And like you said, Rashad McCants has been on record saying, you know, this is what goes on. This is what has happened. So, you know, it's unfortunate. But the other side of that coin, I feel as if you're a recruit, if you're a young man or a young woman coming into these situations, you should want more out of your education.
But are you allowed to get more? I think that's the question. And so what I want to ask you as a former college athlete is Butch Davis's quote that he's alleged to have said, which is, if you want an education, you should have gone elsewhere, basically. Does that seem in line with, maybe not all coaches are going to say that outwardly, but does that seem in line with what coaches probably think and act when they're at these D1 institutions?
I think it falls in line with a lot of coaches that aren't going to say it, as Butch Davis clearly pointed out. You know, there's a lot of pressure on these coaches to win. And there's a lot of pressure on these coaches to win simply because a lot of these kids, especially with basketball, they're one and dones. So as much as you can get, as much as you can get out of this kid in this 1 year, for instance, the Kentuckys of the world, who literally they just reload every year. As much as you can get out of these kids in 1 year, you know, you're gonna abide by the rules, so to speak. But hey, if you're taking, you know, an African studies class,
that's why football's more difficult. Because you got to be there for 3 years.
Exactly, and so you know, the eligibility when it comes to football is just kind of like, okay, you know, when you're talking about a 5-star athlete and keeping him healthy and then keeping him eligible at the same time. You know, that's something that a lot of these institutions are literally just pushing kids to take the easiest classes possible. And like I said, to my point earlier, whether or not the kids can demand more, I think it's one of those situations where you want more for yourself, you know, because there are situations where you may not go to the pros. You know, a lot of these kids are not going to the pros, so what do you have afterwards? A communications degree?
But can they demand more? Because the whole point here is Butch Davis is literally saying, I'm not going to provide you that opportunity. And once you're at the school, if you transfer, you have to sit out a year. There's all these complications. And let's be clear, University of North Carolina is considered, you know, nationally as a great academic institution. So it's not that they're not at a good academic institution. In fact, a lot of those kids might choose UNC because they see it high up in the rankings compared to other places, especially in the ACC. But once they're there, they have nothing they can do. So what is a player to do in that situation? You say they should take control, but is that even possible?
It is on a lot of levels. You know, when I was playing, we were able to not only sit down with our guidance counselors and our tutors, we were walk through kind of the easy classes, and everyone knows what the easy classes and the easy professors are. You know, so that wasn't a big secret. But you know, me personally, I wanted to challenge myself. So I knew that academics came first, and sports was providing that tool for me to get a good education. So when I grew up, that was in my household. Academics before anything. You had to finish your work before you could go shoot hoops. You had to finish your work before you could go play baseball or soccer or whatnot. So that was instilled in me personally at a very young age. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle a lot. You know, and it's a shame because the NCAA, whether or not we want to look at it, is an institution about making money. The top programs recruit the top talent. The top talent makes the money. You know, so if a kid's failing and is not academically eligible, you know, the ticket sales go down, the ratings go down, and that's all generated through, you know, the NCAA. That's all generated through this big conglomerate that says, you know, then that begs the question: should kids get paid? You know, so it's twofold.
It's definitely interesting. I totally agree with everything you're saying. You know, I went to Duke, which is the rival of UNC. Even though at Duke they don't really have, you know, these types of allegations against them, I still think Duke athletics is about money making. I think no matter what school you go to, it's about printing as many dollars as you can off the backs of your athletes. So the nefarious ways in which you go about that might vary from school to school, but I think they're consistent. And I just want to say, like, my last point on this is how sad is it that here we are talking about a white football coach telling his predominantly African-American players that they can't get an education and using African-American studies as the sham classes.
And that's, you know, that's a great point that you brought up, Jack. It's, you know, we're at that day and age where racism and, you know, bigotry and what have you is there's such a fine line, you know, and a lot of times when these comments are made and these allegations are made, it's kind of disheartening.
I mean, it has to be disheartening, I mean, for you especially, but, you know, for anyone, that the sham classes that they're pushing their predominantly African-American athletes to are African-American studies. So not only are you degrading the athlete's ability to get a better education, learn, spend time in the classroom, you're actually degrading the idea of African-American studies.
100% agreed.
Totally. I mean, it's a horrible situation. More coming from UNC soon, obviously.
Yeah,
Roy Williams has been denying it, but I think there's going to be, you know, hopefully this can be a catalyst for change.
Exactly. I hope it sheds light. I hope it sheds a lot of light on, you know, are these kids being pushed into?
Sheds light on the fact that between 50 and 70-year-old white coaches are pushing their 18 to 22-year-old predominantly black athletes to not get a good education.
Exactly.
Our next subject is college sports in a bit of a lighter way. Big game this weekend. #1 Mississippi State at #5 Alabama. SEC showdown. The winner of this game really puts himself in a great position to play in the college football playoffs, but the loser still might be able to sneak in. Key, who do you have?
I've got Alabama. You know, and what's funny is I think everyone in Alabama has Alabama. You know, and these schools I believe are separated by 78 or 80 miles, and you know Mississippi State is #1, and I feel as if the air in Alabama right now is they're coming into our house and they are not going to leave with a W. I think I saw some crazy stat the other day that Alabama is beating opponents at home an average of 30+ points a game. So it's going to be a true test to a certain degree, but I really think that Saban's got these kids ready and rocking to play. And I think that I think Cooper's going to step up. I think Sims is going to take this as a huge challenge, you know, because he's been knocked all season despite playing well. And especially with that LSU game from last week, where the big talk was the miffed kick, if you will, that brought them back.
Snuck out with a win. Really was a loss, dropping their second game this year.
You know, and going into Death Valley is no easy challenge. So I think these kids are going to be ready to play, and I think Mississippi State's going to have their hands full.
I think Alabama's going to blow Mississippi State out. I'm a big believer in we don't like to pick Alabama or root for them because it's not sexy, because no one wants to root for the team that just dominates year after year.
Right.
But Alabama's got a history of stepping up in these games. You know they don't love it that Mississippi State is getting all the hype. Alabama's been the kings of the SEC under Saban. Playing in Death Valley, like you said, is really hard. And as much as I think Mississippi State's a great team, who's had a great year, and Prescott's been a great story, great quarterback, emerging team, Dan Mullen's been a great coach, I don't think that they are a real contender for the college football playoffs. I think Alabama's going to win by 30+.
It's going to be interesting to see if Prescott really steps up to this challenge. Is this going to be, you know, a la Johnny Manziel from 2 years ago when he just came in and blew the roof off when they played the Tide? So I'm going to be interested to see how he's going to handle the pressure of not only taking the #1 team and not only quarterbacking the #1 team, but taking them to Alabama at home.
My prediction is Alabama 41, Mississippi State 14.
Okay. I'm going to go Alabama 36, Mississippi State 21.
All right, so you're giving Mississippi State a little more credit than I am.
Yes.
But the point is we both think Bama are big winners.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to Vegas this weekend, so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to bet on that.
I hear that.
So another lighter topic before we get to our call out of the week, which is, you know, all athletes have their own unique style. For a former athlete, Kee, you got a pretty good style. Nothing
I like to say I can
too
dress.
Offensive,
nothing
but you know,
crazy.
Carmelo Anthony, tough season for the Knicks. Losses are piling up. They're trying to adapt to the triangle, and he busted out a hat that's just so ludicrous and crazy. I don't even know where to start. What is this, Key? What is this hat?
Honestly, I think he looks like
I wonder what that's like in person, because the camera and the image can't even really pick up what exactly material that is.
You know, and Carmelo's had a history of just poor hat wear, if you will, over the years. But this I think takes the frosting, the cake. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like a big cake.
It looks like
with aluminum foil around the sides.
It does look like something crazy people who are afraid of aliens would wear.
Yes.
I mean, I have no idea what to make of this hat. And as an athlete, you know, styles kind of changed in the NBA ever since David Stern put in the dress code.
Right.
What do you make of athlete style and some of Carmelo's choices like that? I mean,
that's not bad. That's not bad.
The glasses are a little too
I wouldn't
much
double up on the blues so much. But, you know, freedom of expression should not be allowed with Carmelo. And I think that's just...
I'm pretty sure that's a video game character that, with Carmelo's face on it.
He just needs to get with a great designer and a stylist and kind of revamp that style. Because when he came into the league, it was like the long cornrows and baggy clothes. And now it's just...
At least, I mean, athletes, because of David Stern's, you know... I mean, I really believe that David Stern implementing the dress code... Well, at the time, you know, there's a lot of uproar saying he was trying to conform his players into a certain type of look. It was amazingly helpful for all these fashion companies, because then athletes started wearing, all athletes were wearing really high-end luxury brand. And it's amazing the effect it had. At first, you had athletes kind of rebelling against it. Now they all embrace it because they can bust out these.
Yeah. And what's crazy, I like to call the dress code the Allen Iverson effect. Allen Iverson back in the day was so against, you know, having to dress up for games and against practice. But, you know, it really has transcended within the last 10 to 12 years. You know, the Russell Westbrooks of the world, the LeBron James of the world, Dwayne Wade's of the world have kind of just taken the culture into their own hands. Carmelo just hasn't embraced it as fully as we would like. I guess living in New York, you get access to certain experimental clothing that may be good. Real quick, who's your favorite best dressed athlete in your opinion? Ooh, best dressed athlete. I'm gonna have to go Cam Newton. Cam Newton. Cam Newton is Cam Newton and Tom Brady are probably when it comes to just suit wear, can't beat them. I'm Dwayne Wade type of guy. I think Dwayne gets the perfect blend between, you know, kind of being risky in what he's wearing and still having that classic look. But Cam's a good pick. So our next segment, before we let Kee get out of here, is our call out of the week. Every week we call someone out. There's a lot of stupid characters in sports, a lot of ridiculous stuff happening. We just covered Carmelo's ridiculous hat, UNC's ridiculous academic standards. Kee, who is your call out of the week? My call out of the week is Jay Cutler, the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Jay Cutler, before this season started, you wanted big boy money and you got it. You are the highest paid quarterback in the NFL this season, and you are playing absolutely like a third string back. You're almost playing as poorly as Geno Smith. And the road doesn't get easier for the Bears as well. I think they have, let's see here, they have the Dallas game coming up. They have the Saints coming up. Playoff contenders coming up against their schedule, even though they're only 3-6. And the Cowboys as well. I think the Cowboys are wedged in there as well. You're making $22 or $23 million a year. Play like it. Let's go. And the tools, the resources that you have at your fingertips. Matt Forte, Alshon Jeffrey, Bennett. You've got Marshall as well. I mean, I'm just in an uproar about this. I hate Jay Cutler because I'm a Broncos fan, and he bailed on us. He did bail on you guys. You know, him being traded, controversy. I hate Jay Cutler. He's not a winner. And that's the thing, in that he's got a great arm. He has all the talent. But I think a quarterback has to inspire confidence. And you've been on the court where there's got to be that leader, the guy who gets paid the most, the guy who's kind of the anointed star, has to inspire confidence. Like you said, he's got every tool in the world. And they're 3-6. Yeah. And the only time they ever made the playoffs under Cutler, he left the NFC Championship game. Exactly, and that shellacking that they took from their rivals, the Green Bay Packers last week, I mean... 1-11 against the Packers now, Jay Cutler. If that's not a telling story, then I don't know what is. Terrible. My call out of the week is FIFA, the World Cup, Qatar. The 2022 World Cup is in Qatar, and, you know, kind of a country with some really strict regulations. Anti-alcohol, and today they asked... I mean, not today. This week they asked the president of the country whether they would loosen the alcohol restrictions, and he basically said maybe in the spirit, you know, maintaining our culture, but wanting to accommodate the World Cup, we could probably eliminate some of the alcohol restrictions. Now they asked the same thing
about homosexuals going to the World Cup, because in Qatar, it's illegal to be gay. So in his response, the president basically said, you know, we'll look into it. We have to make sure we respect our culture, but we'll look into letting homosexuals come to the World Cup. That's ridiculous. That's so offensive and unbelievable. And I just can't believe that in today's day and age, where gay rights have made so much progress, where we care so much about these types of stories and human rights, as we should in sports, where we put the focus on sports in these stories, that this could even be a consideration. I know it's not our country. I know it's the World Cup in FIFA is a governing body the U.S. doesn't have any control over. But I think that if those restrictions are still in place, now again, 2022, we're 8 years away, but if those restrictions are still in place, the U.S. should boycott the World Cup. Because to me, you know, Kee, it's absolutely unbelievable. We boycotted the 1980 Olympics over, you know, basically Cold War tensions. I just don't think that the U.S. or U.S. consumer dollars should support a country that is potentially not letting, you know, is just discriminating like this.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. And what the scary thing is that it is 8 years away. You know, so if that's still the personality that takes on the World Cup, you know, that's damning, you know, to a large degree, and that's also very, very scary.
Yeah.
And that's something that I will not support.
I just think you have to take a stand. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where everyone knows FIFA's corrupt. Everyone had all these questions when they were awarded the World Cup.
Yeah.
And all these stories are kind of coming out now, and people aren't paying too much attention to them because it is in 8 years, and I know a lot can change in 8 years, and hopefully a lot will change. But if you are an American who prides yourself on gay rights and champions gay marriage, how are you going to go turn on the TV in 2022 and throw your dollars at a World Cup in a country that doesn't support?
I won't do it.
Not only doesn't support gay rights, considers homosexuality a sin and against the law.
I won't do it.
So we'll see what happens. Thank God we have 8 years. Hopefully things change. But Kee, thank you for coming on The Zone.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank
Great
you.
discussion as always. Everyone, thank you for watching The Zone. Check back in for an episode next week. And make sure to subscribe to the Lip TV. Hop over to LTV2. Hit the subscribe button there. But the best place to watch all Lip videos for all the amazing programs is the website, thelip.tv. Make sure to follow The Lip on Twitter, @theliptv, and facebook.com/theliptv.